is yes. There was a review done way back in, I think it was 2019. There was an incident that had happened with animal control where they were followed down the driveway and some unwanted behaviour. As a result of that, there were a couple of actions that were put in place for animal control at the time. There is now an electronic gate that is there that stops the members of the public going into the pound facility. There is a dog handover area so that staff can choose whether or not to allow people in. They need to announce themselves. But also we stop the members of the public going straight down to the pound. And so now, well, since 2019, every incident where a person needs to go down to the pound, someone at animal control needs to have been arranged to actually meet them there and know the circumstances for that. So rather than people rocking on down to pick up their impounded dog, they need to come here first, make payment, and then arrange an appointment down at the pound to go and collect their animal.
Thanks very much for that. Does anyone have any further questions? Councillor Grimson.
Yeah, so I just wanted to jump back to the ACO pre-assessment tool that officers go through. What I'm mindful of is officers walking into a situation that potentially turns ugly. At what stage in that pre-risk assessment process is it required to be peer reviewed or one up before a decision to proceed is made?
I guess at this stage, luckily most of the time there are several of us there with our own experiences to help make a decision. The fact that we have newer staff at the moment too means that they're always paired up. Yeah, it's really at this stage just based on communication with the job. We all talk to each other, discuss the information that we've found, and make a decision. 9 times out of 10, genuinely 9 times out of 10, you're going to be paired up with someone anyway.
Sorry, to add to that as well, following every incident that happens that gets reported, so if there's a risk that's identified after having attended, and I know this is ambulance at the bottom, but each one of those is reviewed as well. So that comes back to Rob, look at it, continuously improve our processes if that's what needs to happen. We had an incident the other day with a staff member who had several dogs on a lead. And there was an incident that happened that after that they came back. You would think having several dogs on a lead would be fine. Actually, that's been reviewed now and it's something that isn't going to happen ongoing because of a risk that's been identified. So that's sort of the ongoing, on-the-job sort of assessments that we're doing, not necessarily right at the beginning, but certainly as things happen and we start becoming aware of risks.
And sorry, just staying on that thought pattern for a while, what is the process where information is really not available? So, we're doing an assessment, we've had no previous incidents there where this property is unknown. What is the process when we're lacking that data to make that full assessment before proceeding? And is there an intervention or an additional outreach for information before proceeding?
So the process at this stage is simply that we double up and pair up and go into an unknown property. That's simply it.
Sorry, and there are some other measures as well. Always have your cell phone on your person, ring out to the police if you're feeling unsafe. If you, as you're doing that risk assessment, you think actually there's not enough information even for two men up, then they would speak to Rob, you would talk about what you would need to do. So we've got some areas where we know in the district that there is, cell phone reception's a bit dodgy. You're not always, we're not always confident in being able to do that. They would have those conversations, and that's the process that we talk about all the time with the team. Thinking about not just animal control, but across the board for compliance officers, situational awareness is something that we talk about constantly. Like it's a daily thing that happens within the team around keeping yourself safe and talking to each other about where you're at, keeping your calendars updated, people knowing where you are.
Going. Just thinking, as a team leader responsible for the 6 or 7 other employees, is there a piece of PPE or equipment that you don't have that think is needed or investment is needed to provide that for your team to keep them safe from a health and safety perspective?
If I could just jump in here. So part of the lone worker policy review and process that we're going through at the moment, we've got the animal control team trialling a satellite device that is an emergency beacon, basically. So if they are ever in an area that does not have Wi-Fi or your cell phone coverage, they have a device that is able to send an alarm out. So Rob's team is trialling that at the moment. There is also an app on their phone that can be opened that can send an emergency message also, or a bump in, bump out message going to this address, expecting to be back at this time, and it sends an alarm if you haven't checked in on the system. So that's a piece of equipment that we're trialling at the moment to see if it's appropriate, not just for the animal control team, but they are our trial team at the moment.
So at the moment that was the only thing identified as missing. One of the things that I've started doing since taking on the role that I have is I'm available 24/7 to buddy up with ACOs after hours, so I don't take part in the general on-call roster, so I can support them when needed, and I've never missed a call so far. So.
All right, team, is there any further questions or Member Sarah?
Thanks. Are you the only one that does 24/7? That support?
So I'm the only internal at the stage that does 24/7 support. We also have police available, obviously, and armour guard, but I'm normally the first port of call for advice.
Thanks, team. Thanks, Rob, and your team for everything you do for our community. And out there late at night, hopefully, might see you out there with too many angry people or angry animals. But no, thanks for everything you do. I think we can let you go. And thank you, Tanya and team, for the report. All right, we're going to head back to item 6.1. So I'd like to invite Peishan and Daniel up to the table. This is item 6.1, the Treasury update for December 2023. If I could move 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 today, so that's that the report be received, that the matter or decision be recognised as not significant, and that the committee notes the Bancorp Treasury reporting dashboard for the December 2023 quarter. If I move that, if I could have a seconder. Thank you, Mayor Burney. All in favour? Any against? Thank you. And just before you get started, sorry, also just to acknowledge, I didn't acknowledge Councillor Justin in the audience through my welcome. So thank you, Justin, for being here and observing proceedings. Daniel and Peishan, over to you.
Thank you, and kia ora, Chair and committee members. As a way to introduce that in the report, so since our September Treasury update, we've borrowed a further 8 million, so our net debt is now up to 181 million. In terms of the immediate future, we have 15 million maturing in between March and May, which we've pre-funded, so we'll have the cash on hand to pay that, and we're working to finalise our plans to pre-fund our $22 million maturities in 2025. One note that we did touch on in the September report was the debt-to-income ratio, which we've been monitoring, and as part of the LTP, we've forecasted that to now be sitting at 204%, which is slightly higher than the 196% that we had budgeted. And that's due to some lower than expected asset sales that we'd originally anticipated. Outside of that, I'll take the remainder of the report as read.
Thanks, Daniel. And just to note that we have had an email come around from the team around our Standard & Poor's rating. And I don't know if you wanted to also just talk to that at this point or... Yep, all right, Jacinta.
Thanks, through you, Mr. Chair. So I have circulated that and also some additional guidance that Standard & Poor's set. I guess it's just to note that it is affecting councils across New Zealand, and does hugely relate to the changes in terms of government and the uncertainty around both financial support from central government and also around the uncertainty around support for things like the Three Waters reform and also RMA reform and other types of central government reform. So those are some of the key measures highlighted in there for us. So for us, that takes us from AA minus stable to negative. I guess just one last point to note is we are very close. We're not very close. We are close to our limit. We're very aware of that. And I guess in terms of the financial strategy and the long-term plan, over the next 5 years, we have to be really careful about what we spend and when we spend it, and making sure that we do the best that we can in that space. Daniel mentioned that one of the key reasons for change was around asset sales. And just to highlight there as well, in terms of the long-term plan, the draft that we have set, is we've been quite careful to be as conservative as we can and not assume any. I think the total is maybe 3 million in total that we assumed this year versus it being in double digits from the LTP. So we've definitely been more conservative on that side in terms of what we'd expect. Standard & Poor's have been in contact with us over the last month, looking at our debt levels and asking questions about why they are higher than they had been planned in the annual plan. So when they visit us in May, we do expect some robust conversations about why and the justification around that.
Can I just ask? I'm following that line of commentary around in terms of one of the things that we're proposing to do through the long-term plan draft, as it is at the moment, is to cap the level of capital spending across the next 3 years quite significantly. And so, in terms of that and the impact on those discussions with SMP, is that likely to be looked upon favourably in terms of obviously being really realistic with where we sit in terms of our capital program?
Thanks. Yes, it's a balance. So absolutely, it's favourable from a budgetary performance perspective in terms of we'll be spending less and limiting our capital so that we don't go above our limit of 250%. What that does, though, is come with it challenges around making sure we can invest where we need to in our treatment facilities and in our renewals from an infrastructure perspective, and making sure that we're being really clear for the community about what that means in terms of those decisions and the trade-offs. So while for this long-term plan, as we go out for the draft, we'll have the full potential capital program in there, we will have disclaimers for the community to make sure that they're aware that that full program will not be able to be spent in the first 6 years. And then when we do publish the final results, it will be actually a more realistic picture in terms of what we can actually spend that the community will see. And we've had some good conversations with Audit about that, and that is, I guess, in line with their expectations of what they would want to see.
Thanks, Jacinta. All right, team, opening up to questions, comments on the Bancorp dashboard or related matters. Member Jenny.
A couple of questions, just firstly around this SMP thing. I'm interested in just talking through that a little bit, and also just want to talk about the audit process. So in terms of the Standard & Poor's assessment that came out earlier this week, so it's really interesting for the sector. 15 councils getting adjusted to a negative outlook. Basically, the writing's on the wall now that all those councils, plus all the others that already had a negative outlook, are at risk of a downgrade, and the flow-on consequence of that is higher cost of borrowings. And across councils, we all have rocketing capex investment requirements, inflationary impacts on that capital spend as well. So debt's going up, and potentially the cost of that funding is going up as well. In the results in the report here, it shows that the net debt to revenue ratio has moved since what was budgeted for the current year, and the reasons are around the capital grants and asset sales. And from memory, last financial year we had a similar situation where the results at year end showed much higher debt levels, and the net debt to revenue levels were also unfavourable compared to what had been budgeted. So I'm wondering about the approach being taken leading into the LTP and the risks around really getting those numbers, more real comfort and confidence around those LTP numbers, so that when the budget are set for the LTP, that there's reasonable confidence that we're not going to be sitting here in a year's time going, whoops, we're not going to hit those numbers aren't quite right. We're actually going to be much higher. And I suppose the approach to dialing back the capital spend, that can be quite tricky when there's level of service impacts and a lot of competing priorities. So I'm just wondering about, the realism of that capital dial back, and just, I suppose, wanting a bit more confidence around the accuracy of that budget process leading into the LTP, to provide confidence that, particularly that net debt to revenue ratio, that it's well understood and the risks are being managed across that.
Thanks through you, Mr. Chair. So for us, I guess there's a couple of things, and Daniel may want to jump in at a particular point. In terms of the capital program, so this year Council has agreed to limit it to 40 million at a maximum, and for next year to 40, and then I believe it's 47 for year 3. In terms of the scrutiny that goes on with that, tonight as part of the workshop, we have a session with elected members to work them through the whole capital program and what our proposed approach is for what projects are going to be part of that limited group and which projects will not be part of that limited group. That then we'll go through a further workshop the following week, so that there is a clear understanding around the council table about the impacts for the community of any decisions to limit that capital program. So I think it will get some significant scrutiny over this next few weeks, and then when we go up the final, the community won't have a potential program, they'll have a realistic one in terms of what we can actually do. I guess the impacts on borrowings is something we do regularly discuss with elected members. Where we've had uncertainty is definitely around those asset sales and being too ambitious in the past long-term plan about what we could have. So that's where we have reduced that significantly to something that is smaller and achievable. The other thing that has made things shift over the last 3 years in terms of affecting the ratio is around the grant funding that we've got for CIP. So for our significant projects around the Tara Eco development, there's up to 10 million that we've received in grant funding. And the timing of that has shifted quite a bit as projects move around over this last 3 years. So that has been also quite a big contributor to where we might not have met ratios where we previously thought we would. It's not that we won't meet them in total, it's about which year it happens in for us, and that kind of has caused a little bit of uncertainty around when that's going to happen. Does that answer your questions there?
Member Jenny, do you have any further?
Yeah, can I just ask another question? Thank you, Jacinda. Just in terms of the LTP process and assurance around the whole, the quality of that underlying information supporting the budgets and so on, I'm interested to know where Council's landed in terms of the external audit process. I see there's nothing in the agenda here to tell us today about that LTP audit process, and also in the forward work program there's nothing about the LTP audit. So I'm just would like to know where things have got to in terms of that assurance process. Obviously that independent audit of the numbers, checking them, sort of getting under the hood and looking is an important process, and it's also an important process for the community around the assurance that it provides ahead of that LTP consultation process.
Thanks. And elected members may want to jump in on this as well, but a decision was made to not have the consultation document audited by elected members. And so we are, in terms of the LTP itself, audit we're here have been in for the last couple of weeks. They're hopefully finishing up their audit work leading into us adopting the long-term plan. But given the uncertainty around the environment at the moment, we won't receive a formal assurance on the actual long-term plan information until the final. So there is, while they may have been through all of the information and raised with us where they might have concerns that they want us to address, there definitely is a level of risk for us in that space around not having something formal that is included in the conversation with the community for the draft.
So can I just check? So council's chosen not to have the consultation document audited on the draft LTP, and what's the reason for that, please?
I can speak to that. So yeah, that decision was made at a council meeting last week, the week before. Yeah, and it was primarily around the financial saving by not doing that, and it was felt that. Well, I can't speak for the table, but I think that in terms of the advice which appeared to be accepted by the table was that although we were carrying a level of risk, that the value add of that at this stage, given the level of uncertainty and that there was still some aspects that we were working through, that it wasn't going to be of particular value to us at this point. But yeah, I mean that's essentially where the table fell.
It's good to hear that the audit's happening now and that you are getting feedback, so that if they do pick up anything informally, that process is happening. That's great to hear. Also just interested in what the quantum of the financial savings are.
I think the financial saving was around $15,000 mark. Speak to that now.
I think the other confidence we had, Jenny, was that all the supporting documents, like the policies, were being audited, and that it was only the consultation document itself that wasn't being audited. We were comfortable with the amount of work and data and information that was included in all those policies, that we were, reasonably reassured that that would be fine to go out to consultation with, and that following, obviously, the adoption of the long-term plan, it would be audited, or before the adoption of the long-term plan, it would be audited in a more full state. But I think there were a number of issues in terms of why we considered not having a full audit done on the consultation document, and I think one of those is the confidence that we have in terms of the data and information and the workshops that we had done previously in deciding what should go into the consultation document, but also the knowledge that all those supporting documents were going to be audited as well gave us some reassurance.
That's good to hear. I suppose I just hope that the auditors give you maybe it's an informal process of providing feedback and having a conversation and understanding the audit findings, even if it's an informal mechanism ahead of the draft LTP being adopted by council. That there's that conversation, and if there are any issues picked up, that they are being worked through ahead of the LTP being adopted. Yep. Thanks.
Thanks for that, and I've taken a note of that, because the one other thing I was going to mention is that obviously we did the long-term plan amendment last year, focused on three waters, and so there was some quite considerable testing, particularly in the three waters space, so I think that also gave us a level of confidence. But that's certainly helpful. Thank you.
No, that's a good point. I'd forgotten about that as well. And yes, just acknowledging also with all this change in legislation and change in government, it's been a really tricky time, and there are many councils across the country that are choosing not to have their CD audited. So you've got friends in that patch, but you just need to be aware of the risks as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So one thing I should quickly note is while they're not auditing it and providing assurance on it, they are, though, testing our preferred options within the consultation document and following them through all the documentation and supporting information so that they can test that.
Really appreciate that. That was very useful. Thank you. Is there any further questions from anybody on the dashboard or related matters? Mayor Burney.
Just some comments, really, Jacinda, and you might be in a space to answer this, but the risk that I sense that this government's not going to help the local government sector out in terms of meeting its funding crisis, the sense that Standard & Poor's are giving us a heads up, basically we're going to see a downgrade in our credit rating, and I assume that's from 1 July 2025 rather than 1 July 2024, is it?
It's just straight away.
Straight away, okay. So in the sense that the OCR is probably going to maintain its level, if not increase, over the next 12 months or so. How are we managing that risk? Because that to me seems like, pretty substantial. And, what I don't want to see, I suppose, is us telling our community one story and then 6 months later we're going to have to tell them a worse story. And I just wonder where your sense of that landscape is.
Yes, so before this meeting, we were just actually in a meeting with Bank Corporate Treasury Advisors, having a conversation about our forward program for debt and what we need to do in terms of both making sure we're ready for pre-funding what comes due next year, and also making sure we've got the right mix in terms of fixed and floating cover in place, because we have limits in our policy, and you've seen it in the report around minimum and maximum limits of what our fixed rates have been, and we've typically, through advice, held the fixed levels quite low because of the uncertainty or increasing rates in terms of where they are. We're now in a point of looking at, in terms of interest rate swaps and conversations about fixing our rates for the future, and rates are starting to look to come down in the 2 to 3 year range. And so it's just really for us looking at when the right time to enter into that future debt is. So we are actively looking at, it's looking more favorable given our portfolio that we've got now in terms of future debt, but careful consideration and seeking as much professional advice as we can in terms of when the right time is.
I'm just very conscious that because of our reduction in our capital expenditure, we're pushing or deferring projects which are going to come to a pinch point, if you like, probably in about 3 to 5 years. And, we could be, to me, we almost get some peak at some stage where we're going to have these conflicting sort of risks around interest, debt, or whatever, and trying to do exactly and deliver a capital program. And in the past we've been reasonably optimistic, but I'm starting to change my view a little bit in terms of where the local government sector is going and how it's going to handle this, because I don't see any relief coming from the government in terms of, not in the short term anyway, and where we're going. And it concerns me greatly, actually.
I guess for us, one positive thing is that we have assumed for a wee while in terms of for the long-term plan amendment and for this one, that we are going to have to carry the full burden as a community. And so making the decisions for us around balancing our budget by year 3, catching up for where we haven't fully funded for depreciation in the past, and getting some more rates in to help bring that debt down so that we do peak in year 6, and then we start to create some headroom where we can open ourselves a little bit up in terms of opportunity, or at least not being so exposed to the maximum, I think is a good thing, so that we're not reliant. While there's going to be some difficult conversations around renewals and around what can we invest in and what can we not invest in right now, and Daniel's going to talk through that tonight when we talk about the program. At least we are making some of the really hard decisions now, so that if we are forced to carry the full burden of any impacts, then we at least modelled on that perspective.
Chair, I wonder whether in future risk insurance committee meetings we could have some sort of, we get the Bancorp stuff and we get all the stuff, but maybe some, summary or risk assessment in terms of those sorts of things that we've just talked about would be valuable, I think, for everybody.
That's a very good suggestion, and I'll take that offline, and I'll also talk about it when we come to talk about our work program. But thank you, that's a really helpful suggestion. Member Jenny.
Just a follow-on comment suggestion around managing the interest rate risk. If there's a downgrade, there's a higher cost of funds. Obviously, the market's moving all the time. December it happened to be a little bit lower, and now it's gone up. We've got some banks signalling increases in the OCR, and it changes all the time depending on what data is coming out to the market. So, I suppose in terms of managing risks and the LTP process, I suppose I heard the conversation about swaps and what's fixed in the swap, but I think there's a broader piece around getting advice, and your treasury advisors should be able to help you in terms of the projected interest cost of the portfolio in the longer term, and also some sensitivity analysis, like what happens if you do get downgraded and your cost of funds goes up by X amount. What contingency have you got in that budget line for the cost of funds, so that council's being very, making decisions where it's eyes wide open. You've budgeted X, but potentially it could go up here, or you may get lucky and it'll be below that. But you consciously managing that risk and making a call around where you want to set your key underlying assumptions around the interest costs, for example.
Actually, can I just? That's a really good question, because it makes me think about our forecasting assumptions that are actually obviously form part of our LTP, and whether how we will deal with that through particularly those significant forecasting assumptions. So if you could perhaps answer Jenny's question and then just cover off how we're going to treat that in terms of the significant forecasting assumptions.
So we did seek advice from Bangkok in terms of interest rate projection. So we used the projections provided by Bangkok, and if I may say, for year one, due to the uncertainty in the interest rate market, we actually built in a 0.1 contingency on top of the rate that was advised by Bangkok. But it's only for year one, and we have used the rate provided for outer years from Bangkok.
Yeah, we definitely do. We do that sensitivity, but it's also not wanting to go too crazy with it, so you're providing too much in terms of that budget. But it's a careful balance for sure.
Did you have any thoughts or recommendations for us in terms of what you'd be looking for or suggesting?
I suppose just have a review of that approach, particularly in the context of S&P's recent change to the outlook and the risks around a downgrade potentially. I suppose that's you need to understand what the consequences of that potentially is, and the flow-on impacts to LTP budgets. 0.1 sounds very, very thin margin of contingency, so think about that as well. Yeah, but there's no right or wrong answer. It's a really tricky judgment call to be made, and you've just got to work through the data that you've got and make that call as best you can for the LTP. Yeah.
Hey, Sharon, just to Daniel, did you have anything you wanted to say?
One last bit in terms of if we don't get it right in a particular year, I think that's one thing of the last couple of years where, for example, we'd had a few years ago there was more budgeted than was needed, and then a future year that was then used to help offset any increases in interest in that following year. So at least we are running a little bit of a balanced approach in terms of if we are under or over in a particular year, then we can pick up and help that within it over that as well. It helps a little bit in terms of that balance over a 2 or 3 year period as well.
Any further comments, questions? Anyone around the table on this item? Councillor Grimstone.
Yeah, look, I just endorse seeking some additional advice around an appropriate margin. I would be looking out more than 1 year. I think you're going to have to look to a 3 to 5 year, and you may very well phase that out. And I'm not sure of the local government aspect of it as well, but some of the debts are 5 years, some's at 4, some at 3 on a rolling basis. But does it potentially be more favourable to look beyond the 5 year term? There's no options to lock in a rate and go long with it, which might help with our forecasting of rates as well.
Definitely happy to have a look. Yep. And Sarah, Jenny, I'll check in with you around just in terms of suggestions or ideas that some different councils may use in that treasury space in terms of estimating and margins and
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So we're going to take that offline and excellent. All right. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll move on to item 6.2, which is the Civic Financial Services Statement of Intent 2024. That's Daniel and Paishan again. Thank you for remaining. So what we'll do is we'll move 1, 2.2 and 2.3 so that the report be received, that the matter or decision be recognised as not significant, and that the committee notes the Civil Financial Services Statement of Intent for 2024. I'll move that. If I can have a seconder, please, somebody. Thank you, Mayor Bernie. All in favour? Any against? No. Super. Daniel, I think you're going to talk to this one.
Thank you, Chair. So by way of introduction for this report, so as a reminder, Horowhenua has an almost 1% holding in Civic Financial Services. So the key points to note here is they've further reduced the administration fees that they're offering from 0.35 to 0.33. From our perspective, we just have the one staff member in this very easy scheme at Civic Office, so we're going to be looking at ways to maybe promote that amongst staff once again. Outside of those sort of points, we'll take the remainder of the point as read.
Thank you, Daniel. Anyone got any comments or questions on this matter? There being none, I think we will.
Just, I'd be curious as to the one member who belongs to this Kiwi7, why they chose this. Is it just because they're a local government nerd and they want to be part of that, or does this, Civic Financial Services offer a better return than some of the other KiwiSaver providers?
We will have a look into that.
Just to know, obviously there has been some commentary around our risk around the risk pool aspect. Is there anything further? I mean, there's obviously not much we can do about that. That's just a risk that we need to be aware of and be prepared for. But is there anything further that you think we should be talking or talking about or considering in that space?
we haven't actually had a lot of updates since the last time that we took the matters to the committee for consideration, and we had to pay for the liability that was claimed, so that's done. We haven't actually received any communications as of now, so I'm not too sure on what else we will be able to advise.
Thank you both for that. I think what we'll do then is we will move on to item 6.4, which is the sensitive expenditure report. So I think we'll say goodbye to you, Daniel, and hello to Megan. Welcome, Megan. I think this is your first time presenting to this committee, so and we're going to get Paishan. You're going to speak to the report, but I'll kick us off with 2.1, moving 2.1 and 2.2, that the report be received and that the matter of decision be recognised as not significant. Thank you. That's seconded by Member Sarah. All in favour? Any against? Excellent. Over to you, Paishan.
Thank you. Here today with me, we've got Megan, our financial accountant, to present his first sensitive expenditure report to the committee. So Megan has prepared this report. It is our first time, so we have done some investigations into what other councils were doing in this space for reporting. And so before you is the format that we propose for the report to be presented in going forward, and we will welcome your feedback on that as well. So the intention is to provide this report to the committee on either quarterly or 6 monthly basis, depending on the timing of the committee meeting. In the report, it's reporting the first half of the financial year from 1st July to 31st of December 2023. As a total, we have around 10,000 spending deemed as sensitive expenditure across the CE and the elected members, including the mayors. So what we went through was a due diligence process of checking for proper approval that's been put in place, checking for sufficient supporting documents,
Also checking for reasonableness of the spending. So also we're wanting to note that there was some spending that has been retrospectively approved due to the nature of the transactions. So that's the overview of the report. I'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paishan. And just a note for the minutes that the Mayor has stepped back from the table, given some of his expenditure is noted in the report. And just for clarity, that as part of my role as chair of this committee, I get visibility of this and often sign some of the documentation, particularly for the chief executive and the mayor, in terms of that process. But does anyone have any comments? Member Jenny, I think you were first, and then Councillor.
Thank you for this report, and the dollar values look very reasonable, and I think the reporting here looks, good. I suppose I'm just wondering if the dollars were a lot bigger, I might maybe going, where's the detail behind it? Particularly, if it's lots of travel or entertainment, or maybe doesn't look as appropriate. So I suppose what's the longer term plan around this reporting? Will it stay at this level and change if in certain circumstances?
So because this is the first time, and so we will welcome feedback as well. This is the intention is that if there are any significant jumps in spending or anything like that, they will firstly be brought up with the relevant staff members or elected members. And we also intend for for open conversations about this sort of thing as well. And so if you think there's some detail that you would like because of the amount or the level of spending that's been reported, we do have the detailed information behind all this. So we can provide it if the committee so wishes.
Member Jenny, I think that one of the checks and balances is that there is that internal, or there's that sign-off process in terms of, and so certainly from my perspective, if I saw anything that I thought needed to be profiled or discussed more in more detail, I think that there's certainly a check and balance there. But in terms of the detail you'd like to see in future reports, are you looking for something more, or do you think, yeah?
So I suppose this is all about transparency of how you're spending ratepayer money, and you don't want any perception that you're hiding stuff. So I think, given the quantum here, I'm absolutely comfortable with this level. There are other councils that will just print all the details just to avoid the debate as to what gets published or not. But I think, given these are relatively very small numbers, I think it's appropriate, this high level. And it's actually quite good just to see the summary because it just gives you a high level overview, and there are other processes in behind that. I'd say if there are any other, going forward, if there are larger amounts, like, it may be better just to proactively publish those larger values. Like, for example, if there's a big travel bill for overseas, or something that maybe you feel, just to keep everybody safe, that it's better to be transparent about it and just to publish it, so that to avoid any misconceptions around it.
No, look, thanks very much, and take that on board. We'll note that. So the other thing, I guess, that is within the context of this, is that both the mayor and councillors, and it's opportune that Councillor Tamihana's in the public gallery, that when elected members and Mayor Burney have participated in external training or conferences or seminars, that there is a back to council report, and both the Councillor Tamihana and Mayor Burney are very effective at that in terms of that going into an open council agenda. But I think that if we continue that expectation, certainly at the elected member level, that's also, I guess, a method of providing that assurance and transparency around value for money and that kind of thing. Councillor Grimson?
Yeah, look, I'd dovetail onto that because that was the point that I was going to pick up, because it's about transparency. It's about our community being able to listen to this or see the memo, and then I think what we do need to capture is that it doesn't have to be line by line, but for example, being able to explain that the $7,000 an elected sensitive expenditure relates to the fact that there were 2 elected members that attended the Local Government New Zealand Youth Forum or attended the local government conference. But I think it's really important that it doesn't have to be who, it's just down to this is what the money went towards. So, for example, in the CEO piece, it might be that she attended some local government stuff, she might have been development stuff or a development trip that we need to just notate. So similar to the comments that Jenny has made, that I think it does, whether maybe not in the table report, but some of the big spend items are put within the report in the top bit, just for noting.
Member Sarah.
My experience with seeing this in other boards is that actually it is line by line, and then there isn't any kind of room for, is that a big number or a smaller number, what's significant compared to last time. You're actually just stating this is what it is with a little notation about the reason, and it's clear for everybody, I think.
We'll take those feedback on board, and the next time when we bring that report back, we'll have more details.
Is everyone comfortable if I work with the team just to sort of get the format like as this committee's wanting, based on the feedback that we've had. Thanks team. I assume there's no further questions about this matter. We now move to item 6.5, which is the Risk and Assurance Committee Work Programme. And I'll invite Ashley up, I think. And I'd like to move 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. So that's the report be received, that the matter or decision be recognised as not significant, and that the Risk and Assurance Committee notes the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee Work Programme. If I could move that and have a seconder for that. Thank you. Seconded by Member Jenny. All in favour? Any against? Excellent. Ashley, so I will hand over to you in just 1 second. Just to flag that it was my intention for us to have a broad conversation today around where we wanted to head with this committee, given where we've been over the last 12 months and where we wanted to where we wanted to set our focus. With a number of members missing today, or not here, I've thought about how we might deal with this matter, and so my thinking at this stage is that I'd be keen to have an offline conversation with the independent members and then convene a separate session by Zoom or in-person meeting with the other members to sort of gather the thinking and then come back with a bit of a proposal around what does the next 12 months look like. So unless you want, I'm going to hand over to you in a second, Ashley, but did any of the members around the table have any concerns with that sort of approach? Because I think that certainly I'd like to get that feedback from the independent members and have that bit of that brainstorm with officers present as well, and then have that same approach with the other members and then bring that all together. Any concerns, thoughts, comments on that?
My only thought would be why duplicate it? Why can't the elected members be part with the independent members? I think that would be useful for the elected members to be part of that and hear from.
More than happy. It was probably just reflecting on it's challenging enough to get everyone to a committee meeting, let alone another meeting. But look, I think I'll be comfortable with that approach. If there's anything that members wanted to indicate today, welcome that. But I think what I'm signalling is that a separate conversation with the officers is probably the most effective in terms of transparency for the community through this committee. Obviously, that work program will be brought back, and so there'll be visibility around and further opportunity for debate and discussion. Ashley, did you want to speak to anything on this?
I probably just ditto the comments that Councillor Jennings said. We've had a brief conversation around where to from here, but looking forward to having the discussion with the full table to see what the work plan will look like for the following year. Were there any questions or comments on what is currently in there for the next meeting in particular?
May I just, Ash, did you want to cover the legislative compliance maybe briefly in relation to for this part?
Just to provide an update on the legislative compliance, you have noted, I think 2 meetings ago, we brought a paper where we said that we were looking at how we were going to report to this committee on that. We have made progress with that and been in contact with Comply With, which was a suggested reporting tool through this table. We have made contact with them and also spoken to a number of councils that also use that service and have come to the understanding that that's what we will move forward with. We do have budget allocated in the long-term plan to go ahead and purchase that. All going well, we'll look to commence that 1 July and get that rolled out. So we are definitely making progress there, just reliant on some months going by, a long-term plan being adopted, and then we can move forward with that. We would look to nail the details around when that would be reported through to RAC, but potentially looking at doing it on a 6-monthly basis, but you'd get that reassurance once a year, which is how most councils do it.
So, acknowledging the comments earlier from Mayor Burney just about that desire for perhaps a higher level of information around the risk assessment in terms of some of the financial aspects in terms of the interest rate risk and other things. Is there anything else that members are wanting or expecting to see in terms of that next meeting, acknowledging that we're also going to have a conversation around ongoing work program? Is there anything sort of burning, any flags that anyone wants to raise?
Just a thought in terms of Standard & Poor's are coming in May. Is there an opportunity for them to have a wider discussion with the committee rather than, I know it's generally just me and maybe Sam in terms of that and some of the officers. I think it might be valuable for some of the rest of the committee to understand what their thinking is and why they're thinking like they are. I don't know. I just posed that. That's all. I mean, I just wondered whether, I'm not sure when this committee is due to meet next, but we're
Grayson has helpfully confirmed our next meeting is the 15th of May.
Right.
So if that did coincide...
That's, I think, post their visit in the books.
Generally, they'll come in May, and then probably a couple of months later, they would have had that. They then go away, finish their analysis, and then they will then meet with a committee structure that then decides those ratings. Yeah. We can definitely ask for feedback, but what they generally do is once they've come up with their rating, they will ring us, let us know, and then give us 2 hours to review their words before they publish it online. So it isn't as much of a consultative process, but I think for us, there's a couple of bits for me, I guess. Budgetary performance is one thing. There's a couple of scores for us that you go, gosh, surely we can increase those relative to some other councils. And our economy score is quite low too. So we can definitely look to make sure we've got more guidance around that for when we present back after that.
All right, unless there's anything else anyone wanted to raise, as I say, I'll coordinate offline a session for us to talk more about work planning. Thanks, Ashley. We will move now to item 6.6, which is the Continuous Improvement Audit Actions Monitoring Report, and invite Pei Shan back to the table. What I'll do is I'll move 2.1 and 2.2 that the report be received and that the matter or decision be recognised as not significant. Could I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Mayor Burney. All in favour? Any against? Super. Now, Pei-Shan, I'll invite you to talk to the report. But just to note, because you won't do it, I'm sure, is to celebrate some of the progress and achievements that are noted in terms of a number of the recommendations that have been dealt with. And I reflected in reading the agenda on Member Jenny's comment probably about 12 months ago that one of her focuses was the number of open items, and so I just personally wanted to note how far we've come and the progress that's being made, and I think that's something to celebrate and acknowledge. And I don't know if you wanted to say anything to that.
Absolutely, yeah. Echo your words. Definitely great progress, fantastic to see. So well done to the team, and really good quality reporting in terms of action being taken to address the open items. So thank you for the work on this, and big well done to the whole team, because I'm sure there's lots of people that have worked really hard to make this progress.
Now I'm going to let you talk to it. So thanks, Pei-Shan.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the officers involved in working on those recommendations for their commitment and perseverance, because they are not easy. So it's not. I'm not taking the full credit. So I'm here to present the updated monitoring report. You will see that final audit management letter for 22-23 financial year is also attached. That report was tabled and presented to the committee in November last year. So now it's attached just for your information. So as part of that, we have 9 new items from that letter that have been added to the monitoring report. They are listed in the report in detail. One older recommendation was removed, and that relates to the credit card usage. We've addressed that through the updated sensitive expenditure policy. Audit New Zealand have also consolidated a few similar recommendations together, and that's why we're seeing the 22 open recommendations altogether. And 4 of these are classed as urgent, so we have turned our attention to those and try to work something up quite quickly to be able to address their concerns when they are here next. We have started the work, and so we have managed to make steady progress. We have also included in the monitoring report recommendations from PwC when they were here to do their PAYE and GST compliance review. Very pleased to report that most of the recommendations have been addressed, with only 7 recommendations to work through from the GST compliance evaluation and 1 to work through from the PAYE compliance evaluation. I would like to bring to your attention that the color in the status column for 2 recommendations shown on the last page of Appendix 2 should have been changed to blue as in completed. That's been missed. Apologies. So these are the S123 payments and relocation payments. So that's an overview of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Pei-Shan. And before I open up to questions, comments, I'm going to deal with the one that stood out for me, which was on page 121, which is the property purchases and disposals. The commentary kind of suggests there that the finance team isn't always involved or across property transactions, and maybe I'm reading that incorrectly, but it's kind of my thinking and my expectation that finance would always be a key player and key input into any property related transaction. Can you just speak to that and how things, whether that is a feature of how things are working internally? It just was an interesting point for me.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, in the past, finance isn't always involved in the process, and we will only be told or we will know when there is something that we have to check. So the view is that we want to be able to put a formal process in place where there's something like a flow chart or embedded into a current policy of property purchase and disposal to say that as part of the step, finance must get involved from the start. And so that's something that we've been trying to work on with the property team. But due to them being short-staffed at the moment, we haven't been able to progress that at pace. But that's something that we're thinking of putting in as a formal measure, rather than, hey, have you got anything that we can check? That sort of informal environment that we want to be able to build it into the policy and then make sure that it's compliant too. Yes.
The accountants and the lawyers are always here to make people's lives easier. That's did any did anyone around the table have any questions or comments on any particular items? Oh, you want?
Just one thing to raise, just for the committee's understanding, is I guess the key focus, and it'll come through in this report, the SSP reporting and making sure we've got really good systems and processes around that and improving that's a real focus at the moment. And as well around our asset management and from the infrastructure, Three Waters assets are due by the end of, I think it's the end of April, is that all information related to our Three Waters assets will be in one system, both accessible by our contractor and by us. And it's so that will make some really good strides in terms of comfort for us and comfort for audit in terms of moving forward in a really good cohesive manner that with good systems and processes. So those are probably two key ones that we'll see some significant roll forward in terms of performance in this space in the next 3 to 4 months.
Unless anyone else has got comments or questions, there was one other one that I was interested in, which was the CRM's reporting. Sorry, I can't remember what page that is. Is it? And I just wanted to understand. Sorry, I can't find it off the top of my head, but was just how we are being assured that other suppliers and people involved in that process are actually meeting our expectations. So this was maybe I got the wrong. Thank you, Councillor Grimstone. Yes, so this was because at the moment, so in practice, after hours, we rely on a third party to take our calls, register our customer reports, and so obviously one of the things that's been a feature of past audits has been the lumping together of one particular, multiple calls about the one incident as one item, and so we've now resolved that. But what's our check and balance to make sure that that is actually being done at the third-party supplier level? But how do we make sure that they're meeting our expectations?
Yeah, so we have set up processes with PNCC in terms of the process they have to follow. We also set up internal QA process from council end to make sure when the report comes to us, we do some QA before it's released or before it's used. So there's the two steps quality assurance.
Great, yeah, thank you. Councillor Grumsone, you'll have a question.
I did, and it's more just a confirming understanding, but I understood the audit. He commented on the fact that they could see the work having been completed, but they didn't have enough evidence to be able to close it off at this point, so it would be reviewed at the next audit before it went from green to blue. That understanding correct in relation to that CRM?
Yes, so the process was changed halfway through the last audit when they were here, so there was not sufficient for them to be convinced that we have done what we could. And so this year when they're here, they would like to see the whole full year being changed and captured, yes.
So in terms of our reporting table here, if something is now coloured blue, does it now get removed off the report, or are we putting it in a separate table that just carries on for how long?
I'm looking at you, Chair, to tell me if we can remove the blues or whether you would like them to be captured still.
My initial reaction is remove them, but is there any counter view around the table? Member Sarah.
I think it's quite useful just to see what has been closed between meetings so we don't see it, but you can put it in a separate report so we can just see what's been closed off and then remove it. I don't think we need to keep it going, that's all.
I think that is a clear signal to, that obviously we want to see when it turns to blue in the report, but then once we've considered it in a meeting and it's blue, we say goodbye.
Thank you. So next time you will see a much shorter report.
Thank you, Paishan. Unless there's any further questions or comments, we do have a couple of resolutions that I need to cover off. So I'll cover off 2.3 and 2.4. Move that the Risk and Assurance Committee notes the final 2022-2023 Audit Management Letter in Attachment A, and 2.4 that the Risk and Assurance Committee notes the Risk and Assurance Committee Resolution and Actions Monitoring Report in Attachment B. Do I have a seconder for that? Member Sarah, all in favour? Any against? None. Thank you. Thank you, Paishan. I think that brings us to our late item in committee. Excellent. And hopefully I've got the resolution. You're going to help me out there. Where have I got that? Right at the end. Thank you. Sorry for being disorganised. That one. All right. I'll move that we move into public excluded on the grounds of section 48(1)(a), that the public conduct of the part of the meeting would be likely to result in disclosure of information for which good reason for withholding exists under section 7. Can I have a seconder to move into committee? Thank you, Mayor Burney. All in favour? Any against? Excellent. And just to note that we will invite Councillor Tamihana to stay for the session. Do I need a formal resolution for that or not?
No.